Good morning, students. We have discussed in the last two classes about language learning. I said language, we said, is a medium of communication, of interacting with people. Then we said language is not something that we are born with, but it is a skill that we acquire. Right? And since it is a skill that we acquire, it requires to be developed. Fine. Now, today we shall talk about how language, when you are learning a language, we develop these skills. Now, before I proceed further, let me tell you the classes that is taken either by me or Mr. Singh. It is meant for both the streams, both science and the art streams. Therefore, ensure that you follow each of the lessons by both of us, because none of these lessons shall be repeated. Alright? So it is meant for both the streams. Please remember that. Okay. Now, when we talk of learning a language, I said we basically develop 4 basic skills. We develop 4 basic skills. Alright? And this is not only applicable to English, but it is applicable to any language learning, whether it is Hindi or whether it is learning Bengali or it's French or Latin or Greek or whatever be the language that you learn, you apply these skills in the process of learning any new language, even your own mother tongue. Okay, so the first in this list of skills is the skill of listening. Alright? Now, we start learning a language by listening. Alright? So, first, as infants, we listen to our mothers speaking, and we keep on listening, and then eventually we are able to reproduce those sounds in the form of speaking. Alright? So, the same process continues. We listen to others speaking and then we learn to speak like them. Alright? So, listening is the first skill that we need to develop. So, what does listening basically mean? The first skill. It means you should be able to understand the main ideas of a speech in a standard dialect or a language. We should be able to understand the main ideas of a speech or a spoken by somebody in a standard dialect or a language. Now, this also means you should eventually show or demonstrate an awareness of culturally implied meanings beyond the surface meanings of the text. Right? So, beyond the superficial meanings of words, there are also implications or implied meanings or underlying meanings in a particular context or in the context of a particular culture. So therefore, we need to understand that as well. Okay. Then, we proceed to the next, that is the speaking skills. See, what does speaking skills mean? When we speak a particular language, the native speaker or whose language it is, when such a person listens to you, he or she should be able to understand without difficulty, mind you, without straining themselves, straining their ears, they should be able to understand what you are speaking in their language. Alright? If you are, for instance, if you are not a Hindi speaking person, but when you communicate to a person whose language is Hindi, you should be understood by the person to whom you are speaking the language what you are speaking. The Hindi you are speaking should be understood by a person whose native tongue or native language is Hindi. Alright? Okay, so that's the first thing. You should be able to be understood. Alright, next, you should be able to narrate. You should be able to narrate or to describe both concrete and abstract topics. You should be able to tell or to describe both concrete topics as well as abstract ideas or topics. Alright? And when you are doing this, you should be using sustained or connected speech. In other words, if you want to explain, for instance, how a dish is prepared, you should be able to narrate or describe that in that particular language. So, sequentially, and you should be understood. Your discourse, your speech should be, or your description should be understood by the other. So that is, this spoken skill is also known as a oral skill. Alright? Oral means by mouth, by word of mouth, spoken. Now this involves other skills such as pronunciation. That means you need to pronounce and intonate as closely as possible, with as much resemblance as possible with the native speaker whose language you are learning. Alright? Now, for instance, English should be spoken as, and when it is spoken, it should sound like English. Alright? May not be perfect. So, but as far as possible, we should try to follow the proper pronunciation, proper intonation, and so on. Next, the next two skills are the skills that we develop next. Alright? So we have been listening from our infancy, and then we become able to speak in the same way. So when we are learning a new language at a later stage in our lives also, first we learn to listen and to understand what is spoken, and then we strive to be able to speak and express concrete and abstract topics, either by narrating or describing and so on, in a connected or sustained discourse, speech. Okay. Now the next is reading. Next skill that we develop is the third skill is reading. What does the skill of reading imply? It means the person who is learning should easily follow the essential points of a written text. What does that mean? You should be able to understand the main points of a written text when you read it. So that means understanding parts of the text not only on a superficial level with all the conceptually abstract and linguistic complexities. Alright? So I said the meanings are not only the superficial meanings, but there are some abstract concepts or ideas implied in words or in expressions. You should be able to understand. And language is complex. I said a word, for instance, may carry half a dozen meanings. So in this particular context, what does it imply? You should be able to understand. So the important points of a text when you are reading it, you should be able to understand with all its meanings, superficial as well as underlying meanings. Okay? Next. So that is the reading skill. So when you read a passage, you are able to understand the idea expressed in it. Then we go to the fourth skill, that is writing. Okay? And what does this mean? Writing should be, you should be able to address a variety of topics with precision and detail. In other words, in written language, you should be able to express on a variety of topics with precision. Precision means exactness, and detail. In detail, you should be able to describe something, to narrate something in a written form. In other words, you should be able to organize writing with a sense of theoretical structure. Like for instance, simply writing a sentence is not enough. You have to learn to write a number of connected sentences in order to form a paragraph. Now these are, what is a paragraph? A collection of sentences which are interconnected or which are sequentially arranged or properly ordered so that one sentence follows the other. The first sentence carries on to the next sentence and until the paragraph is complete. So that continuity has to be there, that sequential order has to be there. That's why you have to arrange or you connect your sentences to form a paragraph, and then you connect many paragraphs or link many paragraphs together to make an essay or a piece of a larger piece of writing. So these are the four basic skills that we learn. So in short form, this is known as LSRW. The first letter of each of these skills. These are also known as the macro skills. The macro skills, the major or main skills. Besides this, we have the micro skills. What are these micro skills? Alright? The micro skills involve pronunciation, so that alright, pronunciation and your grammar, your vocabulary, besides these macro skills, we also require the micro skills in order to make others understand what we are speaking. We should pronounce correctly so that the speaker of that particular language should be able to understand what we are speaking. So also, we should follow the grammatical structures, and we require sufficient vocabulary, word power. And when it comes to writing, our spellings have to be correct. Okay. Now, you also divide these 4 skills into 2 types. Alright? The first 2 skills. Now let's say the skills, I told you these are the four main skills. Alright? So these 4 main skills can be termed as a input, which is also known as receptive skills. That includes and reading, and then the next is output skills, which means productive skills, that is speaking and writing. So why is this used? Why is it categorized as such? Because it involves the direction of communication as to whether it's in or out. You know, what is happening in these 2 skills? Listening. The direction of communication is inwards to us. Our mind, we listen to others. We are receiving. And when we are reading, it's stored in our mind. It comes to our mind from outside. Okay? And whereas the spoken skill as well as the writing skill is output. So we are speaking. So the direction of whether it is going out from us or coming to us, accordingly it's divided into either input or receptive skills and output or productive skills. Is that clear? Okay. So basically this is what we talk about. Then nowadays we also talk about a 4th, 5th dimension to the skills that we require or we make use of in language learning. And that is, the 5th is the cultural awareness. Cultural awareness. That means we should have an understanding of the differences between ourselves and the people from other countries. We are learning the language of another culture, a people of another country, and therefore we need to understand and appreciate that there is a definite difference between them and us, and their background and our background. And there is definitely a difference in attitudes and values between the 2 cultures. We as Indians and they as English have different attitudes, different values. We have to learn to understand it, we have to learn to appreciate it. Alright? So that is the fifth dimension to our language skills. So if we do not understand the background of the English, we will not be able to properly appreciate the language, the English language that we are learning. And we would not be able to understand the implications or the underlying meanings of certain terms, certain expressions, certain references. So therefore, a cultural understanding, a cultural awareness is also required when we learn languages. Is that clear? Okay. So that's so these are the four basic skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. They are also known as the macro skills, and these macro skills are divided for the depending on the direction in which either we receive or we throw out the communication. We divide them into input or receptive skills. They are listening and reading, and output or productive skills, that is speaking and writing. And finally, I said we require an awareness. The fifth dimension is the cultural awareness, which is a must. And we cannot ignore the micro skills, which are the rudiments. You have to pronounce properly, learn to pronounce properly, you have to follow the grammatical structures, you have to have ample vocabulary and spellings. These are termed as the micro skills. They are also important. Okay? So with that, we finish today's lesson. Alright? So have a wonderful time.